Hello everyone, welcome back to Mallik 034 channel. This is Mallik Arjun. Okay, starting with today, I'm gonna start one new series regarding Terraform tutorial. So what are you gonna expect in this series? So I'm gonna cover starting from the beginning of Terraform to the advanced level. Starting with what is Terraform, how to install, and what is the use case of Terraform, and what are the other tools competitor to the Terraform, and how it will be helpful for my IAC infrastructure as a code, right? And then with the help of Terraform, how you can manage your infrastructure, and then how you can build, how you can spin up your VMs in AWS, how you can spin up your VMs in Azure, Google Cloud, vSphere, and all the major cloud providers, and then how you can uh, customize your infrastructure component, like network load balancer, your VPC and your VMs, and how you can customize your VMs, how you can run the post provisioning shell script once you spin up your VM. Everything we are going to cover in this at Terraform tutorial. So for that, you what you can expect, you can go to my particular channel Mallik 034, and then you can search for a playlist, and you will see the Terraform tutorial, and then you will see all this particular series of videos, whatever I'm going to cover now. So and then all the content, whatever I'm going to cover, everything will be written in my blog, and you can go to the DevOps, and you can go for Terraform, and then this is a continuation series for going forward. You can always go to the DevOps and go to the Terraform section, and already written two of them. And in this today's session, we are quickly touch base on what is infrastructure, and what is infrastructure as a code, and what is IAC software or IAC tool. So we will quickly touch base on these three topics today, and then tomorrow we'll start with what is precisely Terraform, and then how to install and how to configure and all those things. Right. Starting with what is infrastructure. Everyone knows infrastructure is without infrastructure, you cannot run your business. Without infrastructure, you cannot run your any of the application. Infrastructure is a kind of a framework, and framework is nothing but it is a bunch of resources to run your application. The framework might be anything that might be your VM or your load balancer, your network, or DNS, or your router, or your network, whatever it is may be. That's all combined together. We can call it as a framework. And that framework needed to run your application or to run your software. That framework is nothing but your infrastructure. And that, as I said, that infrastructure might be your a physical machine or a virtual machine, and which support my business or my application or my software. That is nothing but your infrastructure. So what that mean uh, by workflow, right? As I said here, it might be a physical or a virtual workflow, or to support your application or a business. Workflow means you are storing, processing, and analysis. All these three categories together, you can call it as a workflow. In order to run your business, you need a workflow. That workflow means you want to store your data, you want to process your data, you want to analyze your data. That is your business data or end user data, right? So that workflow can be executed with the help of my application or my software. To run your application or to software, you need an infrastructure. That infrastructure components are your servers, network, storage, and the database or the load balancer or DNS or many more. All components are part of my infrastructure. If you don't have any of these, and you cannot run your application, you cannot run your application in the sense you cannot run your workflows. You cannot run your workflow in the sense you cannot store, you cannot process, you cannot analyze your data. And at the pinpoint, you cannot run your business. You cannot run your end user data. So that is what infrastructure plays and a critical role and very, very important role, right? So if I can take my MS Paint, like, I will explain in a minute. These are typically the components you come across day-to-day life: servers, network, storage, database, and load balancer, and DNS, and many more networking concept and all, right? And infrastructure types, you precisely see it as your production environment, your DR environment, your UAT environment, test, development, SIT. Like, these are like are typically the environment people used to call in IT industry, right? And then if you talk about SDLC, software development lifecycle, whenever you do any changes or any configuration, or whenever you want to build your any of the new setup or new servers or new data center, you have to follow your SDLC lifecycle. So what that SDLC lifecycle, like software development lifecycle, you have to build your development and SIT, and you have to build your test, and you have to build your UAT, and then you have to go to the production or the DR side. So this is a typically SDLC lifecycle you have to follow. And if I want to explain in a WordPad, suppose I am a hosting company or the e-commerce. I'm an e-com business, and I want to start my new business. For that, I need my infrastructure, right? So this is going to be my entire infrastructure. And then inside that infrastructure, I'll be having my databases, I'll be having my servers, and then I'll be having my, I can say I'll be having my routers, I'll be having my DNAs, whatever these components, right? I'll be having my hundreds of Linux servers, hundreds of Windows servers, hundreds of databases, and I'll be having my load balancer, right? So all these components together, my infrastructure will run. So once my infrastructure is run, I can typically run my application or the software, whatever the e-commerce application, whatever I'm trying to build. If this is my e-commerce website, e-commerce application I'm building. So that application I need to deploy it on my infrastructure at my database or my server. And once application is built, I need to follow the SDLC lifecycle. So if this is my dev or SIT, this is my dev or SIT environment. And once I'm able to successfully build my e-commerce application in my development or SIT, I need to follow my test environment. A similar concept, I need to take this entire setup, and then I need to build the same setup here for my, for my development, for my test, right? Once the development is ready, and then I'll go ahead and then I can build the similar setup, right? If I can take it as a test now. And then similarly goes, once I successfully tested my environment, my e-commerce application, and then same setup, I will build it for my UAT. And once UAT is successful, I'll go with the prod and DR setup. So assuming that this entire infrastructure setup for my development will take around 2 to 3 months, or sometimes it is 6 to 1 year. If this is the case, if I take a 2 to 3 months for my development environment to infrastructure to set up, and the similar 2 to 3 months I will take it for my test, and similar 2 to 3 months I'll take it for my UAT and then prod, right? So that is going to be time consuming, and it's a huge manual effort you need to put together here. So for that, in order to make it this SDLC lifecycle, in order to make it easy to build your infrastructure, to manage your infrastructure, so we have come across infrastructure as a code, IAC. So I'll talk about that in a minute. Most complete, the requirement for this, right? Most completed, these all tasks, whatever I talked about, right? Most of the companies, like most of the industry, most of the IT companies, right? They are looking for the auto scale up and scale down. For example, assuming that I have done with my development, I have done with my test, and I have done with my UAT, and I have done with my prod, and then I finally build my prod environment, and my application, e-commerce application, went live. So this application, considering it is on live now, so consumers or end users have started using my e-commerce application, e-com, right? And then all of a sudden, the business is going rapidly, and then you want to increase these 1,000 systems, you want to increase it to 2,000, and this Windows system 2,000 to 4,000, these databases from 100 to 200, you need to increase it. So how you can increase it? Again, you need to again, you need to spend 2 to 3 months, again you need to scale it up. All right, so these are the consideration, scale up and scale down your infrastructure. In case your business increases, you need to scale up your infrastructure. In case your business goes down, and if it is off business hours, season, and your business will go down, and you need to out of this 100 server, you need to bring it down to 50 servers, right? So then how you can bring down that again those servers manually? You need to decomp those servers again. That is a huge manual effort. You need to do it. So in order to avoid all this manual or human intervention, so we came across something called IAC, infrastructure as a code, to do all this work, right? To building your all the infrastructure, and to scaling up, scaling down, and to do all these tasks, we have something called IAC, infrastructure as a code, right? What that infrastructure as a code is: provisioning your infrastructure using a script or a tool instead of a manual configuration. Whatever the manual configuration, like building your servers, databases, router, network, rather than doing it manually, you can use something called a script, or you can use a tool to manage your infrastructure. And automatically you provision your infrastructure or the infrastructure component, right? The provisioning in the sense, creating, updating in the sense increasing or decreasing or deleting it. So you want to create a database, you want to create your Linux server, you want to create your VMs, you want to create your Windows server, you want to create your DNS router, you can create it using this IAC by writing some script or by using the tool. And then you want to do increase or decrease by using a script, you can easily do it. So that is where we deal with IAC, infrastructure as a code. And then by writing a code that talk to your infrastructure and work with your infrastructure, and it will provision your VMs, it will provision your network, it will provision your load balancer, it will provision your DNS, it will provision your databases. So rather than going into the console, you can directly write a code, and you can build your entire development server, development infrastructure. And once the codes are ready, it's the same code, you can use it building your test. You just need to run your same code what you've written here in your development activity. And once your test is ready, and the same code, you can use it building your UAT and building your production servers, right? So that is just a one-time writing a script, and you can making use of those same script to build your development, test, UAT, and production servers, right? What are the advantages of IAC? Create a new infrastructure with a script. No need to log into the console every time and create a new infrastructure, right? You can use the same code for building your development, building your test, and building your UAT, and building your production DR servers using the same script. And updating, like for example, if you want to increase your infrastructure and if you want to decrease, like scale up, scale down, you can use the same script to scale up and scale down. You no need to build your new script. And to delete, or you want to decommission your entire infrastructure, you can use the same script to decommission your infrastructure, whether it's a development, test, or UAT, you can use the same script. And then version history control. For example, once you build your entire infrastructure, you can make a version history control, and anything if you modify it, and you can keep that script as a previous version, and you can you can use those new script and modify that, and it will make the version control. And anything goes wrong, you can easily go back to the previous version with the help of version control. So everything is possible with these are like main advantages of using IAC. And coming to the last topic of this session are the tools, right? I said there are many tools in market to use it as a IAC, infrastructure as a code. And one of the major tool is Terraform. Terraform is widely used, and most of the organization, they're using the Terraform. And along with the Terraform, some other competitors are AWS Cloud Foundation for AWS, and Azure Resource Manager. Again, this is the IAC, infrastructure as a code, from Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Development Manager from Google. That is again one of the IAC tool. You can use any of these tools, but Terraform is one of the majorly used tool, because this is the multi-cloud supporting tool. Because with the help of Terraform, you can use this Terraform tool, you can use it in AWS, you can use it in Azure, you can use it in Google Cloud, and also you can use it in VMware, OpenStack, and Kubernetes, and IBM cloud. You can use this Terraform in all the major cloud vendors. That is where Terraform will plays a very, very important role. So it's a time to learn Terraform for all our DBAs or all the DevOps engineers. So that's it for the today's class. I hope you guys are able to catch up with what is Terraform and what is infrastructure as a code, that is IAC, and what are the IAC software or IAC tools are available in the market. So again, brief update: Terraform, the infrastructure is your all the resources like your storage, networking, and database and load balancer, everything comes under your infrastructure. And then IAC is a tool which can be used for managing your infrastructure and to communicate with the infrastructure, to provision your infrastructure, and to build your infrastructure objects. And then some of the major tools available in the market are Terraform, AWS Cloud Foundation, Azure Resource Manager, and Google Cloud Development Manager, and some other vendors like VMware, OpenStack, and Kubernetes. So that's it, guys, for the today's session. And in our tomorrow's class, we'll understand about what is Terraform and how to install Terraform and other tasks. Thank you, guys.